Hello and welcome to Your Individual Wedding, the wedding podcast that helps you feel seen and celebrated as you plan a day as unique as you are.
Bugger! We've got that one there. That's going to be the opener. Shall I start with that? Shall I put that right at the very beginning?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. How are you, Heidi?
Hi. I'm good. As we were just saying, I'm on Ross Wilshire Photography brand today because I'm wearing a mustard coloured jumper to go with your mustard branding.
Which I love very much. Yes, it's nice in you dress for the occasion. I'm not sort of on anyone's brand. I'm just keeping warm because I'm recording at the furthest point away from the radiator in my room. And I'm looking out. It's mid-morning and it's still frosty here. So comfort over branding this morning.
Quite like it though. Blue skies.
I do. Blue skies.
I'd
rather cold but bright is much better vibe, isn't it? Really.
Absolutely.
Cold but bright.
Yeah. Sweater weather, as they say. So, Ross, today we are going to be talking about inclusion and good inclusive practice in the wedding industry. We've spoken to a number of guests who I think it's fair to say don't always feel seen, they don't always feel represented. And so we thought it'd be quite a good idea for this episode to shine a light on good inclusive practice in the wedding industry, because we know it's happening, we see it happening. And so we've been asking for examples of good inclusive practice from our fellow wedding industry professionals. And we thought it'd be quite a good idea to start this episode by laying out our credentials, you and I, as wedding professionals. So are you happy for me to make a start, Ross?
Go for it. Tell everyone about you.
All about Heidi. So I am Heidi. I am Heidi of Glorious by Heidi. I design wedding accessories. So my pronouns are she, her. I'm a 52-year-old white woman. I'm straight. I'm married. I'm mum to 2 grown-up kids, one of whom I'm a full-time carer for, as she has Down syndrome, autism, and GAD. And if you don't know what GAD is, it's generalised anxiety disorder. It doesn't roll off the tongue, so that's why we all go to GAD. My younger brother, when I was growing up, not when I was growing up, all the time, has Asperger's, but undiagnosed until he was in his mid-30s. But looking back, I think it was pretty obvious if you know what you're looking for. And I'm very happy to share that I have had therapy in the past after the trauma of miscarriage, and I am a huge advocate of therapy and reaching out for help when you need it. So that's me. Over to you, Ross.
Wonderful. So I am Ross. I am a gay man. My pronouns are he, him. I'm cisgendered, so I was assigned male at birth and live my life as a male gay man. I am 40. I've been with my partner for nearly 15 years. I have been quite open that was coming out was quite difficult for me. I came out quite late, fairly late in life, so I wasn't out until my 20s. So that was quite a stressful time for me. I too have had therapy for that process, but also for other issues that I've had. I've been quite open about struggles with mental health, depression and anxiety from time to time. I had a period almost a year ago where I was back on medication for anxiety for a period of time. I'm off the medication, but I do lots of other things daily to try and look after my mental health, whether that's exercise or watching what I feed my mind, the things I watch on television, the accounts I follow online. So although I have been fortunate to not need medication all the time, I still need to be careful and really keep an eye on it and notice when things are starting to decline in that area. So really passionate about inclusion and diversity, which is what this is about. I used to work with children with additional needs. So I used to work with children with autism, Asperger's, Down syndrome, and I used to work with adults with dementia. So my whole sort of pre-photography career was about empowering others and giving them a chance to have opportunities that isn't always afforded to them, isn't always easy for them to access certain services. And that whole sort of practice was always referred to as person-centered. So it was about applying what you do and the services you provide to fit their needs, as opposed to trying to squeeze them into a pre-designed set of care packages. So I really like to apply that to my business now, and not just offer a service that's off the shelf, but try and tailor my approach to every single couple, some of whom may have mental health. A lot of my couples are LGBTQ, they might be plus size, they might just be really shy in front of the camera. So I try and bring that sort of calmness and that compassion and that sort of inquisitiveness and that wanting to get to know people before I provide a service. That's very much what I'm about.
Interestingly, so as you were talking about how you like to bring that through into your wedding photography.
Yes.
I was sat and I was listening and I was agreeing, and I was thinking, yes, because my understanding of my daughter's autism and her sensory needs and the triggers for her to her anxiety are very much around sensory issues. And that's why when I have clients who come to my studio for trying on accessories, I'm always very careful to say, are you happy with me touching your head? Are you happy with me? You basically sort of, it's quite an intimate thing to be touching someone's hair and fitting an accessory into their hair. Now, I do that instinctively because that's my lived experience with my daughter. But at no point do I advertise or promote that fact. So if you go on my website, there's nothing on my website about the fact that that's my lived experience. And so I understand if you need time, if you need space, if you'd rather I didn't touch your head. How much of what you've just said to me is evident to your clients? If they go and look at Ross Wilshire Photography's website, I think I know the answer to your social media, but how often and how well do you think you promote that to your clients?
I think it's a continual work in progress, as it is for all of us. I think I have made a concerted effort this year. I have rewritten my homepage to try and address some of those issues. Could probably still be a little bit more explicit and a little bit upfront. What's really interesting, at the end of the last year, I was thinking about my business, and I'm really proud of my business, but I felt something didn't feel quite right. I'm very inclusive. As I say, I'm a gay man. I do a lot of LGBTQ weddings. But then what I realized as well was that I don't base who I am, my whole identity, my whole life on the fact that I'm a gay man. There's so many other assets and interests that I have. So I actually shifted it away from explicitly being all about that. And actually, I think my tagline is about being calm and compassionate for couples that are a little bit self-conscious. And that's sort of not a total rebrand, but I feel that actually we should be really explicit about our inclusive practices, but it shouldn't be, and it still is, for the wrong reasons. It's still a headline if somebody's really inclusive, and it shouldn't be. It should just be a sort of integrated part of what we do. So I'm kind of in the process of trying to make sure everybody knows that that's what I do, but also not make it the standout thing, if that makes sense. Because I think it's about seeing people as a whole, as opposed to just that sort of identity. You know, this person is neurodivergent, or this person is plus size, or whatever it is. So it's trying to work in that language and work in those examples of how you do help all those people that don't feel seen without forcing it, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It is interesting though, because you and I both know that when you are searching for any service, you just throw a term into a Google search engine. And if I was a plus size bride, then you're looking explicitly for that service. You're looking for bridal boutiques, wedding outfitters but quite explicitly cater to your body shape. And whilst you and I think other suppliers are trying to convey their inclusivity in a gentle way, because you're right, it's not the whole package. It's not, I'm not just about respecting and understanding neurodiversity, for example. But yeah, I wonder if we all need to get better at being a bit more explicit about our inclusive credentials. So it'd be interesting, actually, as we go through the feedback that we've had from other wedding suppliers, it'd be interesting to see how much people are doing when it comes to really getting their voices out there and being quite explicit about how are they being inclusive.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, that's a really interesting one. And yeah, like you say, people search for their specific sort of need, or the thing that's sort of most on their mind or important to that element of the day. Like you say, a plus size bridal boutique, or a celebrant that understands neurodiversity. So yeah, it's not easy. And I was talking to a supplier the other day, and we both agreed it's still not easy to. I'm not saying that it's an excuse not to be inclusive or anything like that, but she was saying I could easily get skinny blonde models time and time again, only show those type of models on my website, probably be featured in more blogs, probably get more likes on Instagram. Yeah. But she said, I don't want to do that. And I said, no, I'm the same. It does take a bit more effort to reach out to those groups that aren't seen and to find models, and showcase diversity. It does take more time and effort, but it's worth it from a sort of rewarding point of view, and to know that your business is about much more than just taking bookings and taking the money and sort of cashing in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's great to feel good when you're demonstrating inclusive practice as a wedding supplier, but also if you're being really hard-nosed about it, it is good on social media. I've seen it. If you see the odd picture of a mature couple on social media getting married, the likes and the comments are absolutely off the scale. And I think it's because you don't see it often enough. So when it happens, people get really excited and, really involved in sharing and commenting. Whereas, like you say, if it is your classic white couple, skinny couple, blonde hair, blue-eyed couple, there's loads of that content out there. We're seeing that content every second of every hour of every day. What we're not seeing is ethnic minority couples, plus size couples, plus size grooms. I think we talked about that in another of our episodes. When do you ever see a picture of a plus size groom? Mature couples. So because it's so unusual, when we do it, it gets noticed because people aren't seeing it. So it's like, oh my God, it's a plus size groom. Let's talk about this. Let's share this. So yeah, if you're being, as a wedding supplier, if you are being cynical about it, it's no bad thing for you, your brand, your income to actually be catering to people who are getting married. And they're not all white and skinny, blonde-haired and blue-eyed. So, I'm talking to the converted over there, Ross, I know, but yeah,
but also to caveat that, I think you can see a real difference between the people who are passionate about it and the people who are trying to just cash in. I think these people that we've got in our examples have a passion for it, don't they? That's what comes across in these examples, is that they've really thought about it and they've put themselves in the position of these couples. And I think I think it's, if you're from any marginalized group, it's easier to have empathy with another marginalized group, if that makes sense. So I don't know what it's like to be plus size, and I don't know what it's like to not see anyone with the same color skin as me. But I know what it feels like to not be seen, and I know what it feels like when you feel left out or not included or not celebrated, and not part of something, and that there's not the same level of provision for you, or you don't feel welcome somewhere. So I can put myself in that position more easily, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think people that are just trying to cash in are fairly few and far between. I think most of us have a level of empathy and understanding. Most of us have got either direct experience, or we are. It's a bit like, I'm the parent of a child with a disability. I don't have the disability myself, but I see how underrepresented people like her are. I see the difference it makes to us as a family. If we go to a restaurant that has got an understanding of autism, and has made adjustments for people with autism. So I think a lot of people feel it in their hearts, but perhaps demonstrating it is another issue. Should we get stuck in? Shall we share some of the inclusive practices?
Yes.
Let's do this. So, are you happy for me to start, Ross?
Go for it, Heidi.
So we had a message so basically we reached out to wedding suppliers, and we told them that we were doing this episode and that we really wanted to give a shout out to good inclusive practice. So I had a message from Sarah of Northern Flower, they're a florists. And Sarah responded with, "Hi Heidi, this is so important. It's great you're showcasing more inclusive practices." She says, "You don't have to name check me." Oops. I share my pronouns. Sorry, Sarah.
We have read through these Sarah before, honest.
I share my pronouns on Facebook, Instagram, and use inclusive language like couple and partner, unless they refer to themselves as bride, etc. I also like sharing about my journey with disability issues, dyslexia and ADHD, and mental health too, and find this helps put those at ease, and it's nice to know you're working with a supplier that celebrates difference. So again, it's that first-hand experience, isn't it? It's this wedding supplier is sharing with her potential clients her own mental health issues, her own disability, as in dyslexia and ADHD. And so anybody who is looking for a wedding supplier who shares those conditions can sort of feel a certain level of comfort because they know that supplier has got that empathy. She says that she uses that language and she shares her pronouns on social media, and we are seeing more and more of that, which I think is great. I think, letting people know very directly, very clearly that you are sharing your own pronouns, therefore you respect theirs, is a huge step forward.
Respect is a really key word when you say respect, because I have had people, maybe in my own family, they don't listen to this podcast, so it doesn't matter, where they say, I don't get they, I don't understand they. I'm like, you might not understand it, you just have to respect it. You don't have to understand exactly what it's like to identify that way, but you can just respect it. And I saw a really good example on social media of like, you don't have a problem when someone changes from a Miss to a Mrs. And you can soon get used to a change in surname. So if you're that quick and you're that hot on them changing their language, you can do it quite easily for somebody when it comes to their gender and their gender identity. I thought that was a really good point that somebody made.
It is. And because I'm the age that I am, I remember the hoo-ha over women choosing to call themselves Ms, not Miss, not Mrs, Ms. And I can remember, like, what madness is this? What's wrong with these women? They can't identify as Mrs. or Miss. They've got to have Ms. Whatever next. Yeah. So, there's always been this weird, but this is what we always do and this is what we've always done.
Yeah,
we have. But, things, language changes, understanding of one another changes. And I think that's a really positive thing. So, we will look back, I think, and laugh.
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. I think from the negative experience, like I say, that people don't get it or whatever, and there's sort of references, well, years ago we didn't have to do this and this was never a problem. And I say, yeah, but those people didn't have a voice. They just had to put up with it. The great thing now is those people having a voice about how they want to be referred or how they want to be treated or what is acceptable to them or not acceptable to them. The difference years ago wasn't that it was okay. It was still not great. It's just those people weren't in a position to say it's not okay. So I think we've got a long way to go, but I think it's great to hear people have the opportunity to share their pronouns and say, own who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And we respect that. So go on, what have you got for me, Ross?
So the lovely Jodie from EllaBella Events, she's an LGBTQ wedding planner. She says, using couples throughout your content, whether that's website or social media. So what she means is real couples, because there's a real thing in the industry of just putting two women or two men or, people together who maybe aren't part of the LGBTQ community or throwing them together to make it look like you're being inclusive. And that's something that I know a lot of LGBTQ suppliers are quite hot on now, making sure that it's not tokenistic and it's not just to look cool or to tick a box, that you've actually put some thought into this. So yeah, that's a great one. Making sure when doing a visit to a venue that it's accessible. That's really important as well. And using diverse suppliers for any shoots, editorials, wedding days. And again, never assuming someone's gender or pronouns. Always asking when meeting for the first time and using they if in doubt. And then she ends with always making someone feel safe. And that's what you were talking about on your website, saying it was a safe space. And I think making someone feel safe is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Because people aren't going to work with you. At the end of the day, they are not going to work with you if they turn up to your wedding venue and it's very clear that the wedding venue caters to straight white weddings. Then they're just not going to work with you. They're just going to walk away.
No, they're not.
So
they're not.
Yeah, make people feel safe. But think. I mean, you and I have had this discussion. Sometimes it's very easy to sort of think when we're talking about inclusive practice. We are talking solely about the LGBTQ plus community, and we absolutely are. But inclusivity for me extends beyond that. So it's good to sort of hear that Godie's thinking about diverse suppliers and sort of reaching out to suppliers sort of beyond the LGBTQ plus community. Yeah,
absolutely,
and always making someone feel safe.
It's huge. Yeah. I think all these identities and all these elements of someone's personality aren't mutually exclusive. So, I'm gay, but I struggle with mental health from time to time. You might be plus size and black, like Mercedes was talking about. So you can't just see it as a tick box exercise. You have to see the person as a whole, and people are complex beings. And also at a wedding, you've got all sorts of identities and abilities and ages. So, you're not just catering for the couple. If you're speaking and saying, I work a lot with certain type of couples, well, those couples might be looking at you with a reference to, how do I think my mum will feel around you? Or, my uncle's in a wheelchair. Are you going to be able to work around that for certain elements? So it's making sure that you're not just thinking about the look or the identity of the couples you work with and looking at the bigger picture.
Absolutely. We heard from Erica of Erica Stacey Bridal Couture, and Erica said that each of the appointments at her boutique is specifically for each customer. So she says, we can easily accommodate any minority groups. We have wheelchair access, and as each dress is bespoke, we can easily make any style or design for transgender brides. We are discreet and happy to work with anyone who would like a bespoke design. In response to that, I said to Erica, out of interest, how do you let your clients know that you offer these things? Is it on your website? Do you use your social media platforms to get your inclusive message out there? Or is it something that you offer but haven't yet formed a plan to promote? And her response was, I haven't officially promoted. I should blog about it because each pattern is bespoke. We can cater for any body shape or size and any gender. In response to her saying that she should blog about it, I said, yes, do that. So I think it is interesting, and I noticed this a lot in the responses that we had. And there weren't many responses, Ross. I think it's important to say that as well. I thought it was
That's
interesting.
True.
Other questions, people have been very forthcoming. But when we're asking wedding suppliers about inclusivity and how they demonstrate their inclusivity and how they are inclusive, people are all pretty quiet. I don't know why. Are they scared? I don't know. It was interesting that we didn't really hear from that many people.
No.
But from those that we did hear from, a lot, I got the feeling that a lot of wedding suppliers are very inclusive in their practice, as in Erica's case. But when it comes to actually spending the time to think about how you let your clients know that that's how you work and that they are included in their thinking and in their actions, it seems like we're still, and I include myself in this, Ross, having looked back at my own website, I'm looking, thinking, where am I really demonstrating inclusive practice, inclusive thought? You know, I know that I still need to do work on my own website. And I think this is a thing. I think we're all a work in progress. It's interesting that I think that we are more inclusive than we are actually demonstrating to our clients. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think on the whole, that's very true. And like we mentioned at the start, we both sort of looked at our website and know we need to shout about it a little bit more.
I design accessories, and it says on my website, for brides, and that is my my client base. That, you know, my client base are brides. So using that sort of gender neutral language is quite challenging for me, because I know that the search engines and my clients are searching for bridal accessories for brides. I do, as much as I can, use just weddings, wedding accessories for weddings. But I am conscious that that predominantly on my website it says bridal accessories for brides. So I've been scratching my head over that. You know, how do I make my language more gender neutral on my website while still attracting the clients that I need to attract?
Yeah.
So it is a work in progress for all of us, but I will be looking out for Erica's. In fact, I'm going to push her. Now she said she's going to write a blog about catering to transgender brides. I'm going to go back to her and say, come on then, where's that blog? We need to see it. I mean, it'd be great. It'd be fantastic for her, because she's a pattern cutter. She can pattern to any body shape, any body type. So yeah, it would be a great way of her demonstrating her inclusivity. I think a lot of us think it, you know, I'm doing this. Of course I'm doing this. Everybody knows I'm doing it. Do they? How do they know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting work in progress. So go on, what have we got next, Ross?
So we've got Mark Caffrey. He's a celebrant, a lovely celebrant who I know. And he talks about communication. So asking people how they want to communicate, which I think is quite interesting. And like he says, a lot of story and detail is shared by couples in creating them. So obviously not everyone is great on email, or they might not be great at speech, or, you know, realizing that people have different strengths and weaknesses when it comes to communication. And that's so key when, in every part of wedding planning, to get to know a couple and make sure they can communicate their needs and their wants. But in particular, when you're creating a bespoke ceremony, that you are sort of being their words, you are speaking, their values and their story. So I think communication and realizing the nuances of how we communicate is really important. And like he says, it makes sure that everyone moves forward in a way that works for everyone, and it includes guests who are actively participating in the ceremony. So that's important as well. Like I touched on earlier, it's not just the couple; it's your guests, it's your loved ones, it's people are involved in your big day. They want to feel included and seen and celebrated as well. So it's looking beyond that couple. So he's got some examples. Voice notes were a better alternative to written communication for a guest with dyslexia who I was working with as part of creating my couple ceremony. We had a lot of fun creating the contribution to voice notes and video call. And I think that's really lovely. And it's really simple. Everyone's got a free voice notes app. But again, it's asking people how best to communicate. And I've got, I think, later on, another Celebrant that we'll speak about she mentioned something about doing it before it's too late. And I think, sometimes we don't realize that we need to write from before they even contact us. They, like you were saying on your website, they need to know that it's a safe space and we can accommodate everyone. So those are great when it comes to communication. Then he goes a little bit deeper. Language. So he says he's really inspired by fellow LGBTQIA plus wedding suppliers in what can be a heteronormative industry, which I agree with. And like me, I grew up as a gay cis boy at a time when there would be no possibility of me having a legal marriage. If you've experienced that exclusion and everything around it, you'll have a heightened awareness of being sold at now that you're a market. And I think that's incredibly valuable and a very well put sentence that sums up how I feel sometimes as a supplier, seeing other people, with the token, or let's just get two lads together and they can be our gay couple. That kind of thing. You're a new market, and that there's a fine line that we've already talked about between being inclusive and just seeing a potential income stream. So I think that's a really valuable one. Being a great ally goes beyond sharing pronouns and supporting Pride Month. It's about educating yourself year round, exploring language and challenging gendered assumptions. And I think that's true. Again, we'll talk a bit later about educating yourself as a supplier and just not resting on your laurels, that you do the bare minimum and doing it all year round. Inundated with posts on Pride Month. There's always LGBTQ shoots on Pride Month, and then where are you the rest of the year? Yes, it's a lovely little hashtag for you to use for the month of June or whenever it is, but and I think you can tell the real allies. He says this is a constructive and consistent way to actively create inclusive spaces. Whatever couple you're working with, don't assume gendered language and do ask how they want to be referred to during their ceremony and when they are announced as married. Ask pronouns, don't make assumptions or rely on stereotypes. And I think that's very true. And again, with speaking to Mercedes, she's a bisexual woman married to somebody of a different gender. So people assume that she's straight all the time, or that she can't really be bisexual, or she can't have had those experiences. So I think that's something that's become a little bit more.
For our listeners that haven't heard, for our listeners that haven't heard that episode, it really is worth a listen. When we spoke to Mercedes For Your Party, because she very humorously contacted us and said, I tick a lot of your boxes. I'm black, I'm bi, I'm disabled. So, but it was a really interesting episode, because she was, talking about not making assumptions, just looking at her and thinking, okay, so you're a black woman, so therefore this, and this, or you're marrying a man, so therefore this, and this. So definitely worth a pick up on that one and listen to that one. Sorry, Ross, carry on.
No, it just said, for example, same-sex marriage. He hates the term same-sex marriage. It isn't his language. It's the language of long overdue legal recognition, not human beings wanting an unforgettable wedding celebration. And that's quite a powerful statement to make.
Yeah,
But it sounds like
is
you're doing good
because
things, Mark.
yeah, absolutely. And Mark, it's something, I mean, we go back to this being a learning process, because up until very recently, I used to use that term. I used to say same-sex marriage.
So
and
did
it was
I,
actually
yeah.
you, Rob, that pointed it out to me and said, well, you're assuming then that you know somebody's sex. And that really made me think. I was yes, I am. You know, it's the language that everybody uses. I sound like my grandparents, you know, back in the day, we all used to do that. But, you know, I think as long as you're open to learning, it's okay to have been using terms or have had an outlook that has now, you know, been flagged up as perhaps not as inclusive as we thought it was. And learning from that and moving on.
Brilliant. Who have you got next, Heidi? Thanks for that, Mark, by the way. Brilliant stuff.
Yes, thank you, Mark. And I love the thing about voice notes. That's yeah, a great idea. So I've got Emerald Orchid Weddings, and they are a celebrant. And Emerald Orchid Weddings got in contact and said, I am so careful to say partner and couple. Make no assumptions. We have to make sure that everyone feels heard, supported, and included. So yeah, again, you know, that goes back to trying to use those sort of gender neutral terms, and just as we've said, not making assumptions about people's sex and sexuality. And yeah, I can imagine as a celebrant, you probably have more opportunity to do that, to really get under the skin of your couples, find out more about your couples. There are other wedding services where perhaps that's not as easy. I know, you know, as an accessory designer, I feel that I know the clients who come to me directly and who want a bespoke piece, then those are my opportunities to really converse and really find out about the type of wedding that they're having and who they're marrying. But if somebody buys something from my website, that's just a straight transaction that I really know very little about the person that's placed the order. That doesn't mean to say that I don't have to make sure that when people go onto my website, they feel included and seen, and yeah, so those things are pertinent there. So yeah, short and sweet, but yes, a good one.
No, brilliant. Awesome stuff. We're learning a lot, and there are some great examples. So, you know, we did say we didn't get loads of responses, but I think it's important, if you're a couple listening, you can have high expectations. Don't settle. You know, don't think, oh, nobody's inclusive. I can't find anybody really, so we'll just go with someone. Don't do that. Never settle. You know, it might take a little bit more time, or you know, you might have to search a little bit harder than other couples, but it's worth it. You know, these are proofs that people out there doing wonderful things. And one of the tips I always give is, if you're struggling to find suppliers, just find one supplier that gets you and understands and is putting in the work, because they are guaranteed to know others that they can recommend and point you in the right direction. So like we were saying, the responses we got, although we didn't get, you know, hundreds and hundreds, we pretty much knew the people that would respond and the people that would come up with great examples. We've got our own little community, as it were. So once you know someone who's in that little community, it will help plan your wedding tenfold. You know, the ideas and the inspiration and the other people that you'll be introduced to, it would just, you know, grow and grow and grow, and you'll grow and you'll feel more confident that you can have the wedding that you really want and be surrounded by the people that are going to help you do that. So I'm hoping that if couples are listening, they're uplifted, that there are great practices out there and people are striving to make sure you're seen and celebrated. And of course, if you're a supplier, hopefully it inspires you to, you know, include some of these practices and embed them in the business that you're running. Next, I have Georgia, the lovely Georgia. I do love following Georgia on social media. She's queer-owned business, Freckles and Flowers Florist. And she's put, it's a given that I use inclusive language across all of my platforms. I don't just speak to a bride and groom. In fact, I steer clear of gender altogether and just use gender-neutral language, as well as asking for couples' pronouns. In terms of flowers, I make a point of designing without any focus on gender. I'll always encourage wedding bouquets and buttonholes are for everyone and should be designed specifically for that person. I like that, just for the person, regardless of gender. It's such an easy switch to make with the language you use, and it can really make a difference. The word bridal will absolutely not fit everyone, and that is 100% okay here. By here, she means at Freckles and Flowers. Flowers are not something that should be gendered, and I think that's really important. I had a friend come round with flowers the other day for me, and it was really lovely. I was like, oh, my partner buys me flowers, but I don't tend to get given flowers, and it was really, really nice. As a man to receive flowers. So I love that narrative that flowers, aren't gendered. It's nature. Why is nature for one gender and not the other? So I think there's an amazing point to make.
Absolutely. And I'm a bit of a flower addict, and I tend to try and make it my business to go to a lot of the flower shows, the big flower shows, Chelsea and Hampton Court throughout the year. And when you go, the top designers are men. There aren't as many women working at that level. A lot of the show gardens are designed by male designers. So, who decided? At what point did somebody go, oh no, flowers are for women?
Yeah, crazy.
It does seem a bit bizarre, doesn't it? But yeah, absolutely, they shouldn't be gendered. No, I'm with you on that, Georgia. Thank you, Georgia. Thank you so much for that contribution. That's yeah. I'm similar in my thinking around accessories, but I'm yet to really be approached by grooms for accessories, but I live in hope, and perhaps that's something that I need to be pushing harder on my social media platforms and on my website. So Becky of Hawthorne and Ivory, they're a wedding stationery designer, got in contact. Thank you, Becky. Becky says, I ask for and share my own pronouns on socials, email, signature, and with a pin at wedding fairs. None of my forms or anything on my website is gendered. Literally banned the copywriter I worked with recently from saying bride and groom. Oh, Becky, I love that. That's fantastic. And I make a point to use a variety of couple names in my example stationery designs. They're all from pop culture, like celeb couples and TV shows. So I'm always on the lookout for new queer couples in anything we watch to add to my future sample names list. Then generally just not assuming anything when working with my couples. I'm a queer woman in a het presenting relationship, so I know it's frustrating to be assumed straight, though I also know there's a lot of privilege that comes with that. So I try to never assume anyone's orientation or gender identity, etc. So yeah, more great stuff there on pronouns. Love that she's banned her copywriter from saying bride and groom. Absolutely wonderful. So again, that's a good example of putting your inclusive practice out there. She's doing that on her website, she's doing that on her socials, she's doing that in her product. So that's really, really pushing her inclusive practice out there. So that's something that I think other suppliers could take inspiration from.
Yeah, I love the pin at the wedding fair. I think that's really cool. And I love that she was so forthright with her copywriter. And hopefully that will help spread, make the copywriter think. I don't know whether the copywriter is specifically for the wedding industry or the wider industry, but either way, hopefully it's a little bit of food for thought for them as well, as they work with other businesses. So well done, Becky. Good stuff. So now I cheated at this one because Fiona from Fifi's Cakery is actually a really good friend of mine. So she didn't respond, but I go and visit her at a lovely cakery in Cambridge very often. And I love that her toilets are gender neutral. So you can either go in the cupcake cubicle or the muffin cubicle. So depending on my mood, I'm either a muffin or a cupcake that day. And I just think that's a really nice little fun. It's on brand. It's related to what she does, but it's just a nice little touch. And again, it's that just element of being a safe space, So I think that's a really creative way of being inclusive.
It's nice and simple, and a lot of these things don't. And I think that's why people get scared when they are asked to speak up about their inclusive practices. They panic and think, I'm not doing all the things. And I think the message really is, you don't have to be doing all the things. Just pick a few simple things. That's your starting point, and grow from there.
Yes, so, I think also with I know we were doing a different example, but going back to things like language or website, you don't have to come up with alternate phrases. So like Becky banned bride and groom. or just say couple, or just say you on your wedding day, or both of you on your wedding day. That's all you need to put.
Yeah.
You don't have to get caught up in, you don't have to list every sort of identity separately. Do you know what I mean? If you say everyone's welcome, all identities welcome, you and you, that's it. That's inclusive. You don't have to invent language or, you know, get out a thesaurus. Just avoid certain terms that are very gendered, and it's easy to work around. Less is more, like you say. It's not big things that we're needing to do.
I just want to say, sometimes omitting a word. So one of my big bugbears as a parent of a child with a disability is the word suffers from, or the two words. So when people describe my child as suffering from Down syndrome, or suffering from anxiety, or suffering from autism, I can tell you now that girl suffers from nothing. She is not a sufferer. She is joyous. She is embracing life. She is very forthright. She's very out there and loving life. And so it always jars with me, a wheelchair sufferer. And you look at this person who's got bright pink hair, who's living life, and you think, I'm not seeing this. I'm not seeing the suffering. But it is,
no.
But it is that sort of, so people can put their head on one side and look a bit sad and go, oh, poor you. So sometimes it is just omitting a word, you know, and that's all it takes. You don't really have to reinvent everything. Just drop the bride and groom. Let's go with your wedding and couple, and that's absolutely fine. Or awesome. Muffin and cupcake could be a toilet. I like muffin and cupcake, although I don't think I'm ever going in muffin because it reminds me of muffin top, and I don't want to have a muffin top.
All right, okay. Let's not get into that one at the moment.
Let's not talk about bodies today. So Laura Baker is a videographer, and she is also Lisa Vine's wife, exclamation mark. So we spoke to Lisa a few episodes ago. In fact, it was the last series, wasn't it, that we spoke to?
It was,
to Lisa.
yeah.
And she's an educator, and she goes into educational settings, schools, universities, and she talks about language around LGBTQ plus people, and she was a really interesting interview, so another great one to go and listen to. So Laura is Lisa's wife, and she says, I guess the main things for me personally are always using gender neutral language. We were just talking about this, words like couples rather than bride and groom, or preparations rather than bridal prep in my packages. Even some queer suppliers I know sometimes slip into this, which has really surprised me. And giving clients the option to tell me their pronouns in any forms they fill in, and even what married titles they would like to use. I am and always will be a mus. A mus. Oh, goodness me, what's the world coming to? It's really been important to me personally since I was at school. So even from that standpoint, if you're double barreling your surname or are a doctor, the best thing you can do as a wedding supplier is never make assumptions about anything. We're with you, Laura. That is absolutely what we're talking about today. Making people feel seen, and that's really finding out about them. At the bottom line, that's it. Find out about your couples and your clients. It's interesting what she says about some suppliers slipping into, even though they might identify as coming from a group, still slipping into that gendered language, or, you know, putting people into boxes and not really understanding who they are. It is interesting, isn't it, that we still do, even though we know we shouldn't, and we've moved on from that, and that's not the way to make people feel seen and included. Sometimes we still do it, Ross.
We do, and I also think it's an effect of the society we're surrounded by. It's still the norm. Sometimes that language is the norm, so it seeps in to you, if that makes sense. You know, some of the things, or personally growing up, the trouble I had, some of the things that were negative about being a gay man, I absorbed from the people around me. So it's a interesting dynamic, without going too deep into that one, that sometimes queer suppliers slip into this, and not everyone. You know, I have to say, you know, I chatted earlier about, you know, because I'm from a marginalised group, I feel I have more empathy for other people that are unseen and underrepresented. That's not the case with everyone. Some people don't have any interest in addressing equality issues, or reaching out and making the world more diverse and inclusive, even though they're from that group themselves, which is a little odd one. But not everyone comes from that place, which is very interesting, and why allies are necessary as well. I think it's important that we're not just focused solely on building up our own sort of little bubble of identity, and that we are trying to learn about other people and other cultures and other traditions and other ways of living and being and loving, and I think that's really exciting. But yeah, interesting that she highlights that you expect everyone from the same community to be on board, and that doesn't always happen. And I also just said your little comment absolutely. Of what's the world coming to comment was sarcasm. So it is related back to something you said earlier in the show. But in case your earlier comment didn't make it, because we have had some connectivity issues, and that there will be a heavy amount of cutting and pasting on this episode. So in case you haven't heard Heidi's little blurb earlier about people making the comment of what is the world coming to when it comes to pronouns and stuff, that's why she said it. So we're not berating you at all, Laura, for being a miss. We're very much in favour. I just wanted to caveat that was sarcasm, and she, it's all good. So no offence there.
We might get our first complaint, Ross.
I know. I'm sure not. I just, when I heard it, I thought, I hope people know what the intention behind that is. So yeah, cool. So we've got wedding celebrant Caleigh. She responded to our stories, and she put asking for people's pronouns as early as inquiry and never using gender terms until prompted to. So that's, again, it's getting in there early. It's early as inquiry. And that's not something I do, which maybe I should be doing. So, booking forms and all that in contracts, as early as inquiry, don't always do that. So that's important. So good point, Caleigh. I like that. So, like we said, doing everything right from the very start and making it really, really clear what we're about. So, brilliant one. Thank you for your contribution.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got Tiny Sarah's Cakes. Sarah, she got in contact with us, and she has said working with diverse suppliers, creating dummies with different looking figurines. And when she says dummies, these are the display cakes that cake designers use, and they're not real cakes. Representing everyone, following lots of different people, so I see a different perspective, catering for everyone, not assuming things about my couples and their weddings. So again, that's really finding out about your couples at an early stage. Interestingly, again, following lots of different people, it's good to see that a wedding supplier is educating themselves by looking at the different perspectives. But we have spoken about making sure that you see those different perspectives, you embrace those different perspectives, but perhaps you let people know as well that that's what you're doing. I think, going back to me and my website, I want to get better at letting people know that's what I'm doing. I am doing it, but I need to tell people that I'm doing it. So I think that's quite key for wedding suppliers is to have a bit of look at your social media content, look at your blogs, look at your website, look at your contracts, and make sure that you are using the right language, and you're really finding out about your clients, and you're letting people know that that's what you do.
That's what you do. And that you are looking, I love that Sarah's looking for different perspectives. So, actively trying to see different weddings, and not, I think that one of the biggest problems with the wedding industry in general is that it's very inward when it comes to inspiration. It keeps looking back at itself for inspiration. So you just see the same thing over and over again. And something that I was writing about the other day was that, if you are struggling to see yourself in blogs on social media. Look outside of the wedding industry for inspiration. You know, you can get so much. And I think the very first podcast I did with you, when I interviewed you about style, you talked about finding your style in your home, in pop culture, you know, in the music you love, the celebrities you love, the, you know, the fashion you follow, films. And I think, you know, wedding industry is so insular at times that we need to be bringing more of those influences in. And then we will see more diversity. So if you are struggling and you're seeing the same old weddings represented, then look outside of weddings and remember you can bring in any element from outside of a traditional wedding into your day and make it your own. So brilliant example, Sarah, there of following lots of different people to see a different perspective. So we've got the lovely Kathryn Palmer-Skillings. She's a celebrant. She put, first off, I'm really explicit on my website and other channels that I actively work in an inclusive way for couples who have any kind of access requirement or consider themselves to be disabled or living with a long-term health condition or managing their mental health. I love that she uses the word explicit. That I think that's something we realised we need to be. My inquiry form asks at that point about anything I can do to make the whole inquiry process more accessible and to remove any barriers they may face. No point finding out when we meet, too late. And that's huge, actually. Yes. Is there anything I can do to make the whole inquiry process more accessible? Like we talk about making the wedding accessible, but the whole process of talking to suppliers. So I think that's a incredibly valid and eye-opening statement, actually. So Kathryn, that's brilliant. And then she put, I guess the biggest thing is that because every ceremony I create is really person-centered and completely unique, I'm able to work with every couple I marry to identify any potential barriers that could exist for them in this ceremony and to work with them to find a much more inclusive, beautiful way to have a wedding so it suits them and celebrates them in the way where they feel completely part of it and not just accommodated, which I hate as a word. I can totally understand that. I love that. You know, it's not just being squeezed in, you know, it's like it gives that impression of, you know, when there's not enough chairs and so somebody that comes in sort of a bit late or something, they're on these really squeezed in a corner, they're sort of accommodated but they're not really having the same experience as everyone else. And I think that's really important. And also that she put find a much more a much more inclusive, beautiful way. So it's not just being it's not being inclusive in a way that compromises anything else. It's making it as beautiful, making adaptations or changes or doing things that enhances the beauty of the ceremony. So it's, you know, and that's important. It's not, well, yeah, we can do this for you, but you can't have this, that, or the other. You know, that's just the way it is. It's saying, how do we make this beautiful and inclusive? So I really like a lot of the words that you've used in that, Kathryn, and I think that's some really powerful contents that Kathryn Palmer-Skillings, a wonderful lady who we have invited on the podcast, so hopefully she'll be able to come on and talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, some brilliant points there, don't you think?
Yeah, and interesting, Kathryn, again, you know, she touches on the inquiry process, and you've just mentioned that needs to be accessible. And one of the previous points that was a celebrant as well was about, you know, how do you want to communicate? You know, is it easier for you to do voice notes? You know, do you have a sight impairment? You know, and again, you know, just giving people the space and the prompt to say, yes, actually, do you know what? It'd be so much easier for me to communicate this way rather than that way. At that early stage, that's a learning for me, you know, to make sure that you're early on when you have that first point of contact, you know, find out what is the easiest way to communicate with you, because it's not the same for everybody. If somebody's got a hearing impairment or a sight impairment, it's different.
And how do we know how many people we have unintentionally not been able to work with and offer our services to because they couldn't even get through the inquiry process? How many people that have maybe looked at our site and been like, I can't even, I can't even get to the point of turning up for a consultation or talking on the phone. So yeah, I think that's incredibly important. So brilliant. I think we've got one more, haven't we, to speak about?
From Michelle, the funky celebrant. And Michelle says, from the outset, I'm asking questions of the couples and families I work with around inclusion, language, disability, ability, requirements for the wedding party and guests, and what part do I need to play in their inclusivity planning? And that, Michelle, is absolutely brilliant, reaching out beyond the couple and thinking about, and I think celebrants perhaps have got a little bit of a head start on a lot of us on this, because they are thinking about the whole celebration. They're thinking about the wedding celebration, and that wedding celebration has to include the friends and family, the guests that are there on the day. And some of those guests, and we've spoken about this in previous podcasts, might have a need that needs to be addressed. And when we spoke to the Foxy Celebrant on the podcast, he was saying that he uses sign language. That's his second language. He uses sign language. And so, if you've got guests who require sign language as an interpretation for the ceremony, if he knows that, that's a provision that can be made. So yeah, reaching out beyond your couple to the whole of the family and the friends and the guests. That's great. That's really positive, Michelle.
Absolutely. And then what part do I need to play in their inclusivity planning? So, again, it's going above and beyond.
Oh, you are.
Hello. I'm taking it all in. I'm thinking, what part do I need to play in the inclusivity planning? So it's going beyond. It's like, well, how can I help you further during the process? What else can I do to make sure that it's inclusive for you? So it's not just stopping at what you do, it's making sure everything else. So Stephanie, I know Michelle as well, she actually trains other people in the industry about being inclusive and diversity and stuff. So she does go over and above, and she's got a course that suppliers can sign up to. So she does do wonderful things as well. So well done, Michelle.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, the contributions have been absolutely fantastic. I think it's given me a few ideas as to ways in which I can demonstrate inclusivity better on my website. And in those first points of contact, I'm definitely going to be offering voice notes. I think that's a fantastic idea. So yeah, hopefully, if you are a wedding supplier and you are listening to this episode in particular, you will have picked up some pointers for yourself. And I think overall, the message that I want to get out there is, we know that there's a lot of good inclusive practice going on, but I think just the fact that people were a little bit hesitant in getting in contact with us for this podcast. I mean, thank you so much to those of you who did, but there did seem to be a reticence. It wasn't as forthcoming as other topics that we've discussed, Ross. I think it's fair to say that.
Yeah, totally.
And yeah, I think the message is, come on, shout about it. If you're doing it, let people know. They're not mind readers. They need to feel seen. They need to feel included. They need to understand that when they come to you, you understand those things. Demonstrate it, show it, pop it on your website. Just by changing language slightly. If people are listening to this, I think they may not realise, but we can't actually see each other while we're recording this. Normally, we record visuals and sound. And I think the fact that we've got no visuals means that it's actually quite challenging, isn't it, when you haven't got visual clues? So yeah, I think we need to think about that as well. If you haven't got visual clues, then how are you communicating with your clients? Can you still hear me, Ross?
I can still hear you. I am tuning in and learning lots. Yeah, so just if you don't know, we've had an awful time with our connectivity today, so it has been against us. So we've had to stop and start a few times. So if you're listening and it seems like it's hopping around a bit, that's why we've struggled with our connection. But we really appreciate everyone's contribution. Lots of good things happening just don't be afraid to shout about it, and think about the bigger picture. I think there's, I'm not saying the suppliers that we've talked about at all, because they have shared, but this isn't they're not marketing hats. They're not things that you can't share with competitors, or that, if everyone knows, it's going to damage your business, or people are going to go elsewhere. This is about making everyone feel welcome. This is about making a positive change in an industry, and it has long-lasting impact. So don't be afraid to share good practice when it comes to being inclusive, at the risk of another cake maker or photographer suddenly doing the same. Because like I said at the beginning, it should be it should be part of every business. It shouldn't be your selling point. Shouldn't be that you're inclusive. It just should be part of ingrained in your process. So I don't think you lose anything by sharing and being open about these practices and encouraging other businesses to do the same. There's a bigger picture at play here.
Yeah, and actually all of our guests, when you listen back over previous episodes of this podcast, those guests that are wedding suppliers, and we have spoken to celebrants and stylists and people involved in the wedding industry, you learn something from them and from their perspective and what they're doing. So sharing really is key, and also listening to people who are clients, who are planning their weddings, who are feeling that they're not being seen, they're not being celebrated. If you listen to those episodes, you learn so much about how to be better at being inclusive, and how to be better at projecting that, so that people know that's what you do. So yeah, my advice is go back and listen to every single episode of Your Individual Wedding podcast. Simple as that.
Absolutely. And if you're a couple and you're looking for inclusive suppliers, all the suppliers that we've mentioned, there are links to their Instagram in the description of this podcast. If you just go on your phone, click all the links, and you can give all these wonderful, incredible suppliers a follow and tell them how you found them. That would be brilliant. But thank you so much for listening. And if you loved it, don't forget to rate it on whatever app you listen to your podcast, and write a little review. We love a little review. And we'll see you next time for lots more learning and fun and wedding chat. See you later, Heidi.
Bye, Ross.